Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel. My name's Douglas and I make fishing videos and tutorials to hopefully inspire you to go out and try new fishing methods and to catch more fish. So today guys, you join me back on the shore and I'm at my local estuary, so not far from home, and I'm just having quite a short session today, and the target species is sea trout. Now, those of you that follow the channel, you know, we may be following the channel because of my sea trout fishing videos that I've done in the past, and I do apologise for the lack of those videos this year. But this year the weather has been pretty horrendous, particularly through the summer. Extremely strong winds, and that has been the main reason for not showing any videos. And it's not the fact that I haven't been fishing, it's just fishing in those conditions and filming, it doesn't make sense. You know, there's no point in putting a video out if it's just full of wind noise and you can't hear nothing. So that's been my reason for not posting any sea trout fishing videos. And I've done quite well this season. I think I've had about 21 sea trout up till now, and most of them have actually come on the fly rod. 19 of them actually on the fly rod. Nothing big. This is the biggest one that I've had so far. Nice sea trout, quite golden in colour, and this was quite early on in the season. So today I'm just making my way down to the waterline. It's a lovely day in terms of fishing, nice and overcast. There's a slight breeze on the water, which is perfect, gives plenty of cover for the fish, gives them a bit of confidence. The tide, I've got about an hour until low water, and then I'm only going to fish maybe 2-3 hours max of the incoming tide. That's the plan anyway. So once I get in the water, I'll give you a bit of a rundown on how I'm fishing, and this video really is to give you some tips and tricks on how I fish for sea trout. Now, the method I'm using, I've shown it multiple times before on the channel, and it's using the Bombarda. It is one of my favourite methods for fishing for sea trout. There's obviously many methods that you can use, including fly fishing, but this is what I like to use. Quite a lightweight way of fishing, and it's been very productive for me over the past few seasons. So yeah, hopefully give you a few hints and tips of how I'm actually fishing today, and those hints and tips really are on the back of questions that have been asked by viewers, particularly on using certain equipment. So I'll come back to you in a minute when I'm in the water, and I'll go through how I'm fishing. So guys, I'm not even into the water that much just now, but I have seen a fish moving, so I'm just going to cover this fish just now, just to see if it takes it. Now, I'm not sure if it's a sea trout, it could be mackerel, but let's see how it goes. First cast. And a little tip guys, when you're trying to cover fish that you see moving, particularly sea trout, is try not to cast right on top of them. If you cast right on top of them, you have a bigger chance of spooking them. So try and cast beyond them, and then wind, obviously, your rig into them, into the area that they are. Yeah, so like I said, perfect conditions, little ripple on the water. I actually thought it was going to be very calm this morning, but I'm glad to see there is a little ripple on the water. I found when fishing in flat calm conditions, it is much harder, and there is a greater chance of spooking fish while you're fishing. But this little movement in the water with the ripple, that certainly does give them a bit of confidence. So that fish wasn't interested, maybe I didn't get enough beyond it. So what I'm going to do now is just wade out a little bit, probably up to the top of my thighs. That'll give me a bit more coverage that I can cast to the side, right and left of me, and also behind me. Especially when the tide starts coming in, a lot of the fish can come behind you and they can give themselves away, obviously, if they're on the surface. So yeah, let's get into the water. I'll be back with you in a minute. So guys, now that I'm in the water, I'm actually not as deep as I wanted to go. because I've seen other fish moving just now. So I'm just below my knees just now. So another fish moving to my right in the shallow water. So I'll just go over the rod and reel I'm using. So the rod is a 11-foot feeder rod, and the reel is a 3000 size reel. Now this is a freshwater setup, and just a little point on that, guys, although it's a feeder rod, it's freshwater, I'm fishing in salt water, and on that obviously these rods are built for freshwater, and you need to look after them a bit if you're using them in, oh, there's lots of fish moving. 2 seconds, guys. These are either mackerel or sea trout. Just saw a big bust up over there and to my left. Yeah, so obviously freshwater gear is not built for salt water, so when you get home, you know, do give it a good rinse in fresh water, get the salt off, and that will stop the rod guides rusting. And that's a fish. Oh, it's a sea trout, brilliant. What a take that was. Oh, there's lots of fish moving, really close. So when I'm playing sea trout, I have been asked before on the best way to play sea trout. Now, sea trout do like to go airborne, so I like to keep my rod as low as I can because the fish will try to jump. This one's coming in a little too easy for me, so it's not woken up yet. So yeah, just try to keep my rod low, keeping the fish down in the water. I'm only in about, I don't know, 20 inches of water just now, and it's probably about the length of my rod away from me. Just keep in control. I just try to tire this out slightly because I do think it's got a bit of fight left in it, and there is a lot of fish moving. I had this one on, there was another 2 moving to my right, probably chasing sand eels or sprats. Get my net ready. I don't think it is ready, but I'll try and get his head up. No, he was he was nearly to the net. Saw the net and he bolted. Try and keep his head up this time. Come on, son. Yes. Not bad. Second cast. Nice sea trout. It's got a little bit of colour in it, not pure silver. Get this guy unhooked and I'll give you a little look. Nicely hooked, right in the scissors. Yeah, there we go, that's nice and easy. How about that, guys? Second cast. Hopefully there's more to come from this session, and I'll give you some other tips. Fantastic. A little bit of colour on it. Beautiful. Thank you, buddy. There it goes. So yeah, saw the fish moving just where I was talking to you there, and the cast well beyond. Another fish moving to my right. Cast well beyond them. There's maybe 3 or 4 tons on the reel, and it smashed that lure. I'm just going to continue fishing just now, guys, and I'll talk with you in a second. So I'm just going to cast beyond that fish I saw to my right, seeing if I can interest this. So the fly I've got on is a little sand eel pattern. I've had great success with this sand eel pattern in the past, and I'll give you a close-up of that soon. So yeah, back to the rod, feeder rod, I do like the feeder rod. This method is about being mobile, and you know, it's nice and light. It's got the length of 11 foot. I do like to use a long hook length of approximately 8 or 9 feet. So another reason for the length, but it's got a nice sensitive tip, even though I've got the stiffest tip in this feeder rod. Because I'm using braid alongside the sort of sensitive tip, you know, because of the zero stretch in the braid, you know, that does give me a bit of give in the line, especially when the fish is fighting. A lot of people think that the soft tip in a feeder rod is not enough to hook the fish. Because I'm using braid, guys, you know, the hookup rate is fantastic. It's casting well beyond the fish that I've seen there before. I'm sure these fish will come back. They're definitely feeding, definitely chasing bait fish. I'll give you a little look at this fly, guys. So a little blue and white sand eel, and like I said, I've had great success with this fly. It's been one of my best performing flies. Now obviously I do carry a box of flies with me, different sizes and colours, different patterns. But this fly certainly has, you know, produced the goods, and when it's been tough, it's got me out of a blank. So, you know, it is one that I like to go to, and it's one I do like to start with. So, the Bombarda. Why do I like to use it? Well, it allows me to fish really light flies, or really light lures like flies. You can also use things like red gills on them. If I was using a red gill, I'll go for something about between 10 and 12 centimetres, no bigger. Try and stay as light as possible. Maybe the odd sort of jelly worm would work, but I do like just using this with the flies. It's not fly fishing, but I do think it gives good presentation of that fly. On my reel, I've got 20-pound braid, and that's been a question that I've been asked a lot of, and it's maybe from people that have never used braid before, or not got much experience with braid, and they find that they do get in a lot of tangles with it. Now you can use mono. I used to use mono before, but I very rarely use mono for any of my fishing. In fact, the only time I use mono is for float fishing, or if I'm fishing on a freshwater venue and they don't allow you to use braid, and that's the only reason I actually use mono. Other than that, I stick to braid for all my fishing. Yeah, more fish moving out there. So with this feeder rod, and it just actually reminded me that as I was wading out, I saw a nice flounder there, spooked a nice flounder as I was wading. In my last video, I used the feeder rod and the reel, this exact rod and reel setup, and I had a smashing session just fishing ultralight on the beach for flounders. Now I will put a link to that session in the description of this video, so you can go and check that out if you wish, guys. But it just shows the versatility of this rod and reel setup. So I'm just working that lure, sort of mixing up my retrieve, slower winds, fast winds, little pumps on the rod just to bring that Bombarda closer to the surface. And sometimes when that Bombarda comes to the surface, it makes a noise. It looks like bait fish, and that can also attract the sea trout to you, as well as bass, guys. This is also a fantastic method for bass. There's not many bass in this area. There have been one or two caught this year. I've not been lucky enough to catch one, but you never know. Some of these bass, they may be following the bait fish with the sea trout, so you know, it could happen. Although I'm not as hopeful of the bass as I am of the sea trout. And I don't like to keep casting in the same area all the time. So just fan casting, maybe have a couple of casts, you know, where you do see a fish moving, and then just continue with your sort of casting regime of fan casting. And like I said, this is a mobile method of fishing. and I can walk along this little stretch of the shoreline here. Now I've got waders on. I do think waders are a great advantage, especially like in this estuary or any other estuary. You can get out amongst the fish, you know. Obviously if you just had welly boots on, you know, you will catch fish, but having the waders on, it certainly will give you a bit of an advantage. And like I said, you know, I can wade out further, and as the fish sort of come in on an incoming tide, you know, they'll come behind me and I can start casting into the shallow water and also catch fish that way. But more important with the waders, I think, is when, as the tide comes up, I'm going to get pushed to the shore that way, and it's rocky and weedy over there, and just having those waders on means I can wade out further and cast over this sort of cleaner ground. At the moment this is just predominantly sand. I've got a little sort of reef behind me. The fish do like to congregate around that on the incoming tide and on the outgoing tide as well. So yeah, waders, I think they're a godsend, and any waders will do you guys. These ones are the Witchwood SDS. They're 5 layers, very durable, and I'm not sponsored by Witchwood, but these waders I've had for just over a season now, and I use them for everything. I use them for my float tubing, I use them for my winter fishing, and on my beach fishing and river fishing. The only thing I change up for my winter fishing is because they're breathable waders, and although they are quite thick and durable, I do get quite cold in them in the river when I'm fishing for the grayling. So I'll have a thermal pair of trousers on, and that keeps me warm enough. So yeah, I think I was talking about the braid, you know, people having some problems using braid, particularly light braid. Now this braid is £20 braid. It's Daiwa J braid 8 strand, and this is a darker colour. I would stick to darker colours if you can. I have had them on the tricolour, but I don't use things like, you know, chartreuse or anything like that for this type of fishing. And so some of the problems that people get is tangles with the braid. A little tip when first starting, before you even make your first cast, is just give the braid a little wet in the water. Although I'm fishing in seawater here, freshwater reel, I will rinse this off when I get home. But just wetting the braid, it stops the braid coming off your reel really quickly when it's dry. So wetting the braid, that does help to reduce tangles. I've got a little shock leader on this, and the knot that I use for joining the braid to leader is the FG knot. I do think that is the best braid to leader knot you can use. It's super fine, super small profile, and this rod has got really small rod guides. Another reason I like this rod, but because of the small rod guides, it goes through the guides like a hot knife through butter. Seen fish moving further out, so I may take another little wade out. The tide's still dropped almost down back to my ankles again. I'll try and cast to that fish, but I don't think I'm going to reach it. And when you're choosing a rod, there's not many cheap rods out there that have small rod guides and rod guides that are close together, and it's one of the reasons I do like the feeder rod. It's got very small rod guides, especially on the top section, and they're really close together, and that prevents the braid from looping around your top 2 guides, which can cause you to obviously have a crack off, or it can obviously induce tangles as well. And this rod, guys, this is the Shakespeare Omni feeder rod, really cheap, £30. And like I said, this is a versatile rod for me, and I use it for a lot of different reasons, as well as feeder fishing obviously. And I do like the length of the 11 foot. Oh, that was a take. Is that on or is that a miss? That was a take. Missed that. Not paying attention. Yeah, because I'm fishing Not so much because I'm fishing local, but mainly because of the method. I don't need a lot of equipment. I've got a box of flies, I've got some spare fluorocarbon line, which is mainly for my leaders. I've got a spare Bombarda, some rubber float stops or rubber beads, some size 6 swivels, a pair of scissors, and my camera gear, and that's pretty much it today. And like I say, I'm only fishing for 2 or 3 hours, maybe 2 or 3 hours of the incoming tide, and I've got my landing net. One of the tips I can give you when you're fishing in, with this method in particular, and you see a sea trout following you, is don't slow down your retrieve, and I would actually speed up slightly. That can often induce the take. You know, if they're following you, they're having a good look at that lure, and today, you know, the water's nice and clear, they're going to get a good look at that lure. And obviously if you speed up the retrieve, they've got less time to inspect it. And obviously as you're bringing the lure in, you're coming into shallower water, and sometimes just that alone, coming into shallow water, the fish thinks it's maybe a last ditch effort before it gets too shallow, and they'll have a go at your lure. So one of the tips I can give, if you see a fish following you, it's maybe you've seen it circling behind you as you're bringing it in, is just speed up your retrieve and maybe put a little bit of action into the lure, and that can often induce a take. And if you do get an actual hit, just keep winding, just keep doing what you're doing, and obviously cast again, because even though they hit that, they'll often hit again. So just because you hit a fish doesn't mean you've actually spooked it. So just keep trying until you think you've maybe exhausted the area, and then move and try somewhere else. So normally I just like a nice steady retrieve with the Bombarda. Occasional sort of pump of the rod tip, just add a bit of movement. Sometimes you'll catch them with the additional movement, other times you'll get them just with a straight retrieve. Sometimes you'll get them with a wind and pause. Now a lot of people think that the Bombarda spooks the fish, and I would say the only time it does spook the fish is when you're fishing and it's light glass. Anything that you cast at a fish can spook the fish, not just the Bombarda. So yeah, that's the only time really the Bombarda will spook the fish. Even at splash, when you cast out, it's got a nice delicate splash. And one of the reasons for that is when I cast out, when I'm casting out, I actually stop the Bombarda probably about 2 or 3 meters off the water before it hits the water. Because I'm fishing with quite a long leader, quite a long hook length, you need to be able to turn that fly over behind the Bombarda. So stopping the Bombarda just before it hits the water, that allows that fly to turn over, and it gives a sort of lighter splash, if you like. And that splash that you hear with the Bombarda, it's just like a fish moving. That can often bring fish in to investigate. And you know, I've said there that obviously people think the Bombarda spooks the fish. I've seen the sea trout actually chasing the Bombarda. Now I use the sinking Bombarda. It's sometimes advertised as an intermediate, but this Bombarda is completely clear, and it does sink, and it probably sinks maybe 1 foot per second. So not really quick. This is a 15-gram Bombarda on that I've got on just now, and I normally use between a 15 and a 20 gram. I'll go to a 20 gram if I'm casting into a headwind, just so I can punch it through and get that bit of distance if I need it. Now, although the Bombarda does cast a great distance, because obviously light braid, and I'm only fishing a really light fly, although it does cast a good distance, I'm not after distance, because many of the fish that I catch are within maybe 30 yards. But it does give you the opportunity to cast far should you need it. So maybe I see a fish that's moving a little bit further away from a normal casting distance, I can probably cover it with this. So it is one of the reasons I do like the Bombarda, is it does cast a nice distance. But like I said, it by no means spooks fish. Unless it's really calm. And maybe bright sunlight and calm, which is probably the worst time to fish really at. I have caught fish like that when it's been bright and calm. I did have to work really hard, but you'll have more chance, I feel, even in bright sunshine, as long as there's a little ripple in the water, that does give the fish a bit of cover. But bright sunlight and flat calm conditions, they're probably my worst conditions that I would fish in, and I would probably stay away from that condition if I had the choice. So stop the Bombarda, nice little plop. You can actually see the fly falling behind the Bombarda sometimes. And you do need to keep an eye on the Bombarda as you cast, so that, you know, it doesn't crash down into the water. So you do want to stop it. Sometimes you can lose sight of it. The Bombarda can crash into the water, and the leader that's following, or the hook length that's following the Bombarda, can crash down on top of the Bombarda, and that can cause some tangles. But I very rarely get tangles, very rare. Unless I've missed the Bombarda hitting the water, like I said, and sometimes your hook length can wrap around your Bombarda. But most of the time, I do see it. So I've stopped that there. See the fly landing behind the Bombarda. Now, because it's clean ground here, predominantly sand and mud, I could let this Bombarda hit the sand if I wanted to. You know, it's not going to get hung up on anything. But really, I only let it sink. It's probably only, I would say, maximum 4 feet out there when I'm casting. So I'm only letting it sink maybe a second before I wind in. And the majority of the time, when I'm fishing so shallow like this, I just wind straight away. It's up to you guys, you know, how you fish and work the Bombarda. If you're fishing over ground that's a bit more broken, a bit more weedy, obviously you can sort of count down the Bombarda how much you want it to sink, and depending on the depth of water, obviously, that you're fishing in. So the fish seem to have stopped showing themselves, so it could either possibly be it's slack tide just now. Sometimes find it slack tide, things just go a little bit quiet until the tide starts pushing in again. So I'm just going to basically go over the rig that I'm using. I'll show you the Bombarda, but I will show you in more detail the rig. So like I said, 20-pound braid mainline on my reel. That goes to a leader probably between 10 and 12 feet long, and that's 10-pound fluorocarbon, and that's joined on using an FG knot. I've then got my sinking Bombarda, all clear, 15 grams. You put that on next. Comes down to a little rubber float stop, or a little rubber bead, size 6 swivel, and then I've got 8-pound fluorocarbon. That's my hook length, approximately 8 or 9 feet long, and coming down to my fly, or any lure that you chose to use. Now, like I said, I will show you in more detail how I tie the rig, so if you stay tuned for that. So guys, the rest of the session, it went really quiet. I fished for another hour or so. I had that one fish right at the start, second or third cast, which was really good to get. It doesn't happen all the time. And I had that other take shortly after it. I continued to fish. The fish themselves, you know, they stopped showing themselves, and for some reason they just stopped biting, and that's the way it goes sometimes with the sea trout. But this was just a short session today for myself, and hopefully I gave you some tips on how I fish the Bombarda, etc., and the setup. What I will do though is I'll leave a link here. This is how I tie the Bombarda. It's the way I tie it all the time. It's very simple and very easy to tie, and it is very productive. I'll also leave a link up here. This is to my sea trout fishing playlist, and feel free to watch those videos, guys. That will be much appreciated. All I've got left to say, guys, hopefully I'll get another few sea trout fishing sessions in before the end of the season, and I will see you next time on Piscator UK. Thanks for watching, guys.